The sound of his cries still echoes in my mind, a sound no parent ever wants to hear, especially when you're just a few feet away, powerless. She called it discipline. She genuinely believed she was doing good. But when I saw the fear in my son's eyes, I knew, with every fibre of my being, that what she did wasn't discipline at all. And soon a judge would agree. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about toxic neighbours, unbelievable betrayals, and the quiet battles that explode into chaos. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Our move to Meadowbrook Lane was supposed to be a fresh start. A quiet, tree-lined street, manicured lawns, and the promise of a safe, friendly community for our 5-year-old son, Liam. My wife, Sarah, and I had spent months searching for the perfect suburban haven, a place where Liam could ride his scooter, play in the park, and grow up with a sense of freedom we cherished from our own childhoods. The house itself, a charming 2-story with a generous backyard, felt like a dream come true. Our immediate neighbours, the Hendersons, were the first to greet us. Mr. Henderson, a jovial man with a booming laugh, offered to help us unload boxes, while Mrs. Henderson, a woman named Carol, brought over a freshly baked apple pie. They seemed like the quintessential friendly neighbours. It was through Carol that we first heard about Karen, who lived directly across the street. "Oh, Karen," Carol had said, with a slight imperceptible shift in her smile. "She's very involved in the community, has a very strong sense of what's right." I didn't think much of it at the time. Every neighbourhood has its quirks, its strong personalities. We nodded, thanked Carol for the pie, and continued unpacking, excited about the future. Liam, bless his energetic heart, was thrilled with the space. Our old apartment had felt cramped for his boundless energy, but here he had room to run, to explore, to simply be a 5-year-old boy. He was a curious child, bright-eyed and eager, always asking questions and pushing the boundaries of his small world in harmless ways. If there was a puddle, Liam found it. If there was a branch to climb, he'd attempt it. He wasn't malicious or disobedient, just a child, full of life. Our first encounter with Karen happened a few days later, while Liam was playing in our front yard. He was trying to catch a particularly vibrant butterfly, giggling as it flitted just out of reach. Sarah was gardening nearby, and I was watering the new shrubs. From across the street, a woman emerged from her pristine, flower-bordered porch. She had an air about her, a kind of rigid uprightness that seemed to signal a permanent state of disapproval. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her clothes immaculate, even for casual wear. This was Karen. She didn't wave or offer a friendly greeting. Instead, she walked briskly to the edge of her lawn, hands on her hips. "Excuse me," she called, her voice sharp, cutting through Liam's joyful sounds. "Is that child yours?" I straightened up, surprised by the abruptness. "Yes, he is. That's Liam." She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Liam, who had paused, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "He's running on the grass. You should teach him to stay on the sidewalk. You'll ruin the lawn." Sarah and I exchanged a glance. Liam was running on our lawn, and it was hardly being ruined. We had just moved in. The grass was already a little uneven from the previous owners. "He's just playing, Karen," Sarah said, trying to be polite. "He's not hurting anything." Karen sniffed. "Discipline starts young, dear. If he doesn't learn boundaries now, what kind of person will he become?" She then gave Liam a stern look, as if trying to transmit her displeasure directly into his innocent mind. Liam, sensing her disapproval, shuffled his feet and moved closer to Sarah. It was an odd, unsettling introduction. We tried to brush it off as an overzealous neighbour, perhaps someone who took immense pride in her garden. But a tiny seed of unease was planted. It wasn't the last time Karen would offer her unsolicited wisdom. Over the next few weeks, these small instances accumulated. If Liam laughed too loudly while playing catch in our backyard, Karen's window would mysteriously open, and her head would pop out just for a moment before disappearing again. If he left his bike on the edge of the driveway for a minute too long, a perfectly folded note would appear on our doorstep, detailing neighbourhood bylaws about obstructions. She had an almost uncanny ability to be aware of every perceived infraction, no matter how minor. We noticed she treated her own 2 children, teenagers named Ashley and Brandon with the same rigid control. They were quiet, almost unnaturally so, often seen doing chores or sitting silently on the porch swing, rarely laughing or running like other kids their age. It seemed Karen equated discipline with absolute silence and meticulous order. My wife and I would often talk about it in the evenings. She means well, probably, Sarah would say, trying to find a charitable explanation. Maybe she just doesn't like noise. Or maybe, I'd reply, she just likes control. We decided to keep Liam close, especially when Karen was around. We'd try to avoid direct confrontations, hoping that if we simply ignored her subtle intrusions, she would eventually get the hint and focus on her own perfectly manicured life. We were naive to think it would be that simple. Karen was not one to be ignored. The first truly overt incident happened at the neighborhood park, a place we frequented with Liam. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, bustling with children and parents. Liam was on the swings, pushing himself higher and higher, his delighted squeals mixing with the general joyful din of the playground. Sarah was chatting with another mom, and I was watching Liam from a nearby bench. Suddenly a shadow fell over me. It was Karen. She had seemingly materialized from nowhere, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. "Your son," she began without preamble, "is being far too rambunctious." I looked at Liam. He was swinging as children do with enthusiasm. "He's just having fun, Karen. It's a park." "Fun, yes, but there's a limit. He's going too high. He could fall and hurt himself. And think of the noise. It's disturbing the peace." She then stepped towards the swings, her expression firm. "Liam, get down from there this instant. You are being disruptive." Liam, startled by her sharp tone, let his momentum die down. He looked at me, his eyes wide with confusion. He knew Karen, of course. He'd seen her many times, always with that severe expression, but he'd never been directly scolded by her like this. "Karen," I said, rising from the bench, my voice calm but firm, "Liam is with me. I appreciate your concern, but I'm managing him." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "Managing him? You're allowing him to be a menace. A child needs a firm hand, especially at his age. If you don't teach him proper decorum, who will?" She then walked directly up to the swing, grabbed the chain, and stopped Liam's motion abruptly. "You're done, young man. Go sit on that bench and reflect on your behavior." Liam, now truly upset, started to whimper. Sarah, having noticed the commotion, quickly walked over. "Karen, what are you doing? Let go of the swing." Karen released the chain, folding her arms. "I'm merely teaching your child a lesson about respect and appropriate public behavior. Clearly you two are incapable." That's when the argument began in earnest. Other parents had started to notice, their conversations dying down. Sarah, usually more composed than me, was furious. "You have absolutely no right to touch my child or tell him what to do. Stay away from him. Someone has to teach him manners." Karen retorted, her voice rising. "This generation of parents so permissive, it's no wonder children are running wild." We ended up leaving the park, Liam clinging to my leg, clearly shaken. The joy of the afternoon was shattered. We vowed then and there that this would not stand. The next day, Sarah went over to Karen's house, hoping for a calm, direct conversation. She returned a half-hour later, her face pale with frustration. "She doesn't get it, Mark," Sarah said, slumping onto the couch. She genuinely believed she was in the right. She said, "I'm doing you a favor. You'll thank me when he's a respectful adult." She basically told me that if we don't discipline Liam properly, she would have to step in. Again. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. She would have to step in. It sounded less like a threat and more like a twisted sense of civic duty. We decided to be more vigilant. Liam was not allowed to play outside without one of us right there. We avoided the park when we saw Karen's car. We started taking him to a different, further park. It felt like we were prisoners in our own home and neighborhood, all because of one woman's overbearing nature. Karen, however, seemed to relish this new dynamic. She'd observe us from her windows, sometimes even sitting on her porch with a cup of tea, watching our every move. It felt like a bizarre, silent power struggle. She was testing our boundaries, and we were trying desperately to reinforce them without creating a full-blown war. The disputes continued, escalating in frequency and intensity. One afternoon, Liam was playing in our backyard with his friend Ethan, who lived 2 houses down. They were playing with a toy airplane, making whooshing sounds and little engine noises. Nothing excessive, just typical kid play. Suddenly, Karen appeared at the fence separating our properties, her face a mask of indignation. "Can you keep the noise down?" she yelled over the fence, startling both boys. "Some of us are trying to enjoy a peaceful afternoon." I walked over to the fence. "Karen, they're just playing. It's the middle of the day." "It's excessive," she snapped. "And frankly, your son is influencing Ethan negatively. Ethan is usually a very well-behaved child." Ethan's mother, who had just come out to check on the boys, overheard this. She looked appalled. "Karen, that's quite uncalled for. My son is enjoying himself. It's a beautiful day for children to play." Karen scoffed. "Children should learn to play quietly then, not disturb the entire neighborhood." The conversation devolved into a heated argument, with Ethan's mother defending her son's right to play, and Karen doubling down on her belief that all children should adhere to an invisible code of silence. It was clear Karen wasn't just interfering with Liam. She saw herself as the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood decorum, especially when it came to children. This incident alienated another neighbor from Karen, but it didn't deter her. In fact, it seemed to embolden her, as if she now had a mission to correct the entire street's approach to parenting. The incident that truly shattered our sense of security, the one that would haunt our family for months, happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah had taken Liam to the local library for story time, and I was working from my home office. It was a bright, breezy day, and I had the window open, enjoying the quiet. Around 2:30 p.m, Sarah called me. "Mark, I just ran into Karen at the grocery store," she said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "She saw Liam and me, and she had the audacity to tell me that Liam needs to learn how to walk in a straight line in public aisles. She said he was meandering and could cause an accident." I sighed. "Unbelievable. What did you say?" I told her to mind her own business, very clearly. She just gave me that condescending smile and said, "Some children just need a firmer hand than others." I swear, Mark, she's getting worse. She seems to think she has a divine right to tell us how to raise our son. We spent the evening talking about it. We had installed a security camera system after the fence incident, just for peace of mind, but we never imagined we'd actually need it for anything serious. We considered reporting Karen for harassment, but we didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily. We just wanted her to leave us alone. The next day, Liam was home from kindergarten. He was playing happily in our fully fenced backyard. Sarah was inside, preparing lunch, occasionally glancing out the window to check on him. I was still in my office, focused on a deadline. Around 1 p.m, a chilling sound ripped through the quiet of our home. Liam's terrified screams. They weren't his usual frustrated cries or playful shrieks. These were primal, desperate screams of fear and pain. My heart leaped into my throat. I bolted from my office, Sarah already ahead of me, running towards the back door. We burst into the yard, our eyes scanning frantically for Liam. He was in the far corner, near the back fence, curled into a tight ball, sobbing hysterically. And standing over him, her face contorted in a mask of stern disapproval, was Karen. She had climbed over our low-back fence, a fence meant for privacy, not as a barrier against intruders. "Liam!" Sarah shrieked, running towards him. I followed, my blood running cold. Karen turned to us, her expression unwavering. "He was picking my flowers," she said, her voice calm, devoid of any empathy. I told him repeatedly not to touch them. He wouldn't listen. Sometimes a child needs a moment of quiet reflection to understand the consequences of their actions. As Sarah knelt to comfort a trembling Liam, I saw it. His small hand was red, almost purple, where he had clearly been gripped tightly. His little face was blotchy, tear-streaked, and he was struggling to catch his breath. "What did you do to him?" I roared, a raw, protective fury consuming me. Karen looked at me with disdain. "I simply held his wrist until he understood that he needed to stop. He was destroying my prize-winning petunias. This is discipline, Mr. Davies, something you clearly failed to provide." Discipline, she called that discipline. The image of Liam crumpled on the grass, shaking with fear, and her standing over him like some twisted arbiter of justice, burned into my mind. This wasn't a neighborly dispute anymore. This was a violation. This was an assault. Sarah was holding Liam, rocking him gently, whispering comforting words. He just kept pointing at Karen, tears streaming down his face, unable to form words. "Get out of our yard," I snarled, my voice low and trembling with rage. "Get out now, or I'm calling the police." Karen's face hardened. "You wouldn't dare. I was merely ensuring that your child learns respect for property. I have every right to protect my garden." "You have no right to touch my child," Sarah screamed, finally finding her voice, her face tear-streaked from Liam's distress. Karen, seeing our absolute fury, finally hesitated. She scoffed, gave us one last look of utter contempt, and slowly, deliberately, climbed back over our fence. The moment she was gone, Liam clung to Sarah, burying his face in her shoulder. His sobs slowly subsided, replaced by shuddering breaths. We spent the next hour just holding him, trying to reassure him, trying to erase the terrifying image of Karen's face from his memory. He refused to go near the back fence for days, and even weeks later, he'd occasionally wake up from nightmares. That evening, the decision was made. There was no more avoiding it, no more hoping she would get the hint. Karen had crossed a line, a fundamental, unforgivable line. This was no longer just about boundaries or privacy. This was about the safety and well-being of our child. The next morning, with Liam safely at my parents' house, Sarah and I walked into the local police station. My hand still trembled slightly as I recounted the incident to the officer, trying to keep my voice steady, but the raw emotion of seeing Liam so terrified kept breaking through. Sarah showed him the faint red mark still visible on Liam's wrist. We also provided the officer with footage from our security cameras, which, though not capturing the exact moment Karen grabbed Liam due to the angle, clearly showed her climbing our fence and standing over our son before we rushed out. It showed Liam's distress and our frantic reaction. The officer listened patiently, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "This is serious," he said, his voice quiet. "Interfering with a child, trespassing and physical contact that caused distress, that could constitute assault at the very least, will also be involving Child Protective Services." That was a new shock. CPS. We understood why, but the idea of our family being under scrutiny, even in the context of being victims, was daunting. A CPS caseworker visited our home later that week. She was kind and understanding, reassuring us that they were there to help, not to judge. She interviewed us separately, then spoke to Liam, gently, using age-appropriate language to ask about what happened. Liam, still visibly shaken, recounted how Karen had grabbed his hand and wouldn't let go, telling him he was a bad boy and that she would make sure he learned his lesson. The caseworker meticulously documented everything. Meanwhile, Karen began her own campaign. She visited other neighbors, including Carol and Ethan's mom, spinning a narrative of victimhood. She claimed we were overreacting, that she was simply trying to teach our son manners, and that we were neglectful parents for allowing him to run rampant and destroy property. She even hinted that we were the real problem, bringing down property values with our chaotic child. Her attempts to sway public opinion largely failed. Most of our neighbors had witnessed Karen's increasingly aggressive behavior firsthand. Carol Henderson, who had initially been cautious, became a staunch ally, offering to provide a witness statement about Karen's long history of unsolicited advice and confrontational behavior towards other children in the neighborhood. Ethan's mom, too, was eager to cooperate, recounting how Karen had berated her son and tried to interfere with his play. This network of supportive neighbors became a crucial lifeline, offering emotional support and confirming Karen's pattern of behavior. The police investigation proceeded. Karen was formally questioned. She stuck to her story. She was disciplining a naughty child, acting as a concerned citizen where the parents were failing. She genuinely seemed unable to comprehend that she had done anything wrong. Her conviction in her own righteousness was chilling. Weeks turned into months. The legal process felt agonizingly slow. Liam was seeing a child psychologist, helping him process the trauma. He was slowly, cautiously, returning to his old self, but the innocence, the carefree abandon, had a new, fragile edge to it. We had to explain to him in the simplest terms that no one, not even a grown-up, had the right to touch him or make him feel unsafe without our permission. Finally, the charges were laid. Trespassing, simple assault and a protective order application. It was decided that a family court judge would hear the case, considering the child's involvement and the nature of the alleged discipline. The day of the hearing arrived, a crisp autumn morning. The courtroom was formal, imposing. Karen sat across from us, flanked by her lawyer, her face impassive, almost serene. She looked like she was attending a charity luncheon, not facing charges related to harming a child. Sarah and I sat gripping each other's hands, trying to project strength for Liam, who was not present, but whose well-being was the central focus. My testimony was difficult. Recalling Liam's screams, seeing his fear, describing the red mark on his wrist, it brought back the surge of helpless rage. Sarah's testimony was equally powerful, her voice breaking only once as she described Liam's nightmares. We presented the security camera footage. The judge watched it intently, his expression unreadable. Then it was Karen's turn. She took the stand, head held high, and spoke with an air of absolute conviction. She described Liam as unruly, disrespectful, and a menace. She recounted the incident not as an assault but as a necessary intervention. "I simply held his wrist, Your Honor," she stated, her voice clear and unwavering. "He was destroying my property, ignoring my warnings. As a responsible adult and a good neighbour, I felt it was my duty to ensure he understood the gravity of his actions. I was disciplining him. It was firm, yes, but entirely appropriate given the circumstances. I was doing what his parents clearly wouldn't." Her lawyer tried to paint us as overprotective, litigious parents, exaggerating a minor incident. But the prosecutor, armed with our testimony, the security footage, and the statements from other neighbours, systematically dismantled Karen's defence. The child psychologist who had been working with Liam also testified, explaining the psychological impact of such an incident on a young child, differentiating between healthy discipline and a traumatic experience. The prosecutor's closing argument was concise and impactful. "Your Honour," she began, "Mrs. Davies and Mr. Davies are Liam's parents. It is their right and their responsibility to discipline their child as they see fit, within the bounds of the law and decency. It is not Mrs. Peterson's right. Her actions, by her own admission, involved entering private property without permission, making physical contact with a child, and causing that child significant emotional distress. She referred to her actions as discipline. But as we have heard, discipline does not involve terrorizing a child who is playing in his own backyard. Discipline does not involve physical restraint by a stranger. The evidence clearly shows this was not discipline. It was an overreach. It was an intrusion. It was quite simply child abuse. The words hung heavy in the air. Child abuse. Hearing it stated so plainly, in such a formal setting, underscored the gravity of what Karen had done. The judge recessed for a short time to consider the evidence. The wait felt like an eternity. Karen remained impassive, her gaze fixed straight ahead, as if the entire proceeding was an unfortunate misunderstanding that would soon be rectified in her favour. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. His voice was calm, measured, but his words carried immense weight. "This court has reviewed all evidence presented, including the testimony of Mr. and Mrs. Davies, the child psychologist, the neighbourhood witnesses, and the security camera footage. We have also considered the testimony of Mrs. Peterson, who states her actions were merely a form of discipline." He paused, looking directly at Karen. "Mrs. Peterson, this court finds that your actions on the afternoon of date of incident, involving physical contact with a minor child, Liam Davies, on his own property, without the consent of his parents, and causing him distress, were not an act of discipline. They were an unlawful interference. Your invasion of private property, your unauthorized physical restraint of a child, and the resulting trauma inflicted upon him go far beyond any reasonable definition of parental discipline. This court views your actions as a clear case of assault and a form of child abuse." The words struck Karen like a physical blow. Her perfectly composed face began to crumble. The judge continued, "Therefore, I find Mrs. Peterson guilty of trespassing and simple assault. Furthermore, a permanent protective order is hereby issued, forbidding Mrs. Peterson from any direct or indirect contact with Liam Davies and requiring her to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from him at all times, with the exception of unavoidable public spaces like sidewalks, in which case no interaction is permitted." He then delivered the sentence. Mrs. Peterson is sentenced to 200 hours of community service focused on anger management and boundaries training, a significant fine to be paid to the Davies family for damages and psychological support for Liam, and she will be placed on a probationary period of 2 years. Any violation of the protective order will result in immediate arrest and harsher penalties. As the word guilty left the judge's lips, a high-pitched sound erupted from Karen. It started as a choked gasp, then quickly escalated into a guttural shriek. "No! This is insane!" she screamed, leaping to her feet, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. Her perfectly coiffed hair was now askew, her face bright red, contorted with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "I was helping that child. I was doing what's right. You're all blind. They're letting him run wild. They're unfit parents. I was doing my civic duty. This is a travesty of justice." Her lawyer tried to restrain her, whispering urgently, "Karen, please, calm down." But she was beyond calm. She was beyond reason. Her eyes darted wildly, landing on Sarah and me. You're ruining my life. You're letting that boy become a hooligan. I just wanted him to be a good boy, a respectful boy." Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity and outrage. Bailiffs moved quickly, surrounding her. She struggled against them, still shouting, her voice hoarse, her previous composed facade completely shattered. This was her complete meltdown. The woman who had obsessed over every minor deviation from her idea of perfection was now a picture of public, uncontrolled chaos. She was dragged out of the courtroom, her screams echoing in the marble halls long after the doors swung shut behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah and I just sat there, numb, holding hands, the weight of the past few months finally lifting, replaced by a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. In the weeks and months that followed, life on Meadowbrook Lane irrevocably changed. Karen's public meltdown in court became neighbourhood legend, confirming what many had suspected about her increasingly fragile mental state and extreme views. She became an outcast. Few neighbours spoke to her, and those who did reported her continued self-justification, her unwavering belief that she was the victim. Her children, Ashley and Brandon, who had always been quiet, seemed to shrink further into themselves, avoiding eye contact and spending even less time outside. Within a year, the Hendersons moved, selling their pristine house and vanishing from the neighbourhood, unable to bear the constant tension. For our family, the verdict was a vindication, but not a complete cure. Liam's journey back to full emotional health was gradual. He still hesitated near the back fence, and for a long time he was wary of any unfamiliar adult, especially women who looked remotely like Karen. We continued his therapy, showering him with love and reassurance, rebuilding his trust in the world and in our ability to keep him safe. We emphasized that what happened was not his fault, that he was never bad, and that his feelings were always valid. Slowly, the fear receded, replaced by the natural joy and resilience of childhood. He eventually started playing in the backyard again, and his laughter once more filled the air. The financial compensation from Karen helped cover Liam's therapy, but the true cost of her actions couldn't be measured in money. It was the stolen peace of mind, the shattered sense of security, and the moment of terror etched into our son's memory. The protective order meant we rarely saw Karen. She had to take an indirect route to leave her house to avoid coming within 500 feet of Liam's school bus stop. She never looked at our house, her eyes always fixed straight ahead, as if we were invisible. It was clear she held no remorse, only resentment. This experience, as painful as it was, taught us invaluable lessons. It solidified our understanding of the profound responsibility of parenthood, not just to nurture and protect, but to fiercely advocate for our child when external forces seek to harm them. It taught us the importance of setting clear boundaries, not just for children, but for adults too, especially those who believe their self-righteousness grants them permission to overstep. We learned that sometimes discipline isn't about teaching right from wrong, but about an individual's desperate need for control, a warped perception of order, and a frightening inability to understand empathy or boundaries. Karen called it discipline. The judge with the weight of the law called it child abuse. And for our family, that judgment, painful as it was to secure, finally allowed us to begin healing. It was a stark reminder that true discipline comes from love, understanding, and respect, never from fear or control. And that ultimately, a child's safety and well-being are paramount, above any neighbour's misguided sense of superiority.